What's the Shroud of Turin?
The Shroud of Turin is believed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. It's a very unique artifact because we get in this singular artifact the death, burial, and resurrection of the historical Jesus, and no other artifact does that.
What is a burial cloth?
Right. A shroud, which is mentioned in all four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is simply burial clothes. It's a linen garment that a corpse is wrapped in. And in a Jewish tradition, similar to a pita, how a pita, if you get a pita
Like
and
pita
enjoy
bread?
yeah, literally, it just wraps from over your feet, over the head, and then back around the front of the feet as well. And that is that's when the body is laid to rest within the burial shroud. That's a shroud.
Brandon, do we need the Shroud of Turin to help solidify the argument for the resurrection of Jesus? Is this a necessary thing for you to believe in the resurrection of Jesus?
I like the way that you framed that question because I would answer that no, it is not necessary. I'm not currently in a position of totally hating on this shroud, but it is concerning to me is how I would put it if it's something that is a foundation for someone's faith. If your belief that the resurrection happened is rooted in the shroud being legit, that's concerning to me because it's not, well, why is it concerning to you? Maybe
you probably know, like, for some reason, this topic of the Shroud of Turin is like irritating me because we have a chance to actually give arguments for the resurrection of Jesus. And it's like, hey, top of our list, Exhibit A, Shroud of Turin. And that would not be like, if you were to ask me, do you believe the Shroud of Turin is 100% the shroud that Jesus was laid in? I would say I do. Well, I do not believe that it is 100%. I don't even know if it's 90%. But if the question I think we should be asking is, do you need the Shroud of Turin to 100% believe in the resurrection of Jesus? No, I do not need the Shroud of Turin to believe in the resurrection of Jesus. And I think why this is gets to me a little bit is when the disciples are making their argument for the resurrection, when Paul is doing that so well in 1 Corinthians 15, he's like, look, Peter, all the apostles, me, I'm the least of these because I persecuted the church. You can talk to them. The scriptures affirm the resurrection of Jesus. The Old Testament tells us he would die and 3 days later rise. And he's pointing to different reasons why he believes. I mean, if Peter or the apostles or some sort of significant church leader had the Shroud of Turin, or the shroud, I should say. Mm-hmm. I don't think about it. And look, we can see Jesus' imprint on this during the resurrection. Don't lose the shroud. This is so key to our faith. I guess my thing is there's so many things we could talk about to say, here's evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Yeah. On my top 10 or 15 or give a high number, I would not have the Shroud of Turin at all on that list for me.
Yeah.
I don't need this to believe in the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah. And I think if it's tricky, right? Because part of me wants to say, if it's helping someone be interested in the question of did Jesus rise, that's good. If it's basically like cracking the door open for someone to even like consider that as a possibility, and if it ends up being like a gateway into them then looking at the biblical case, looking at the historic case for the resurrection of Jesus, in that sense, I would be happy for it being a conversation starter or like a research starter. If God has somehow used it in someone's life to build their faith, I think I'm for that. But again, with a strong caveat of if it comes out in some verifiable way that it's not real, does that then crush your faith? And I think that's the counter side that I'm looking at. That's my biggest concern, frankly, is if the main thing isn't the main thing for you, then I think your foundation is a little bit shaky, and not for any good reason. Like basically, like I don't know, the way I'm looking at it is like it might be a cool the way I put it in this other video. It might be a really awesome Easter egg that God left for us. To discover later, maybe, but at the very most, I would say it's an Easter egg and not the main feature of the narrative.
Absolutely. Okay, so I would agree with you that the shroud itself is an argument for the resurrection of Jesus. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do think it's interesting, as he notes in this video, that the shroud is mentioned in all four Gospels. Like the fact that if the argument is the disciples stole the body, it's the shroud being left there nice, neat, and folded goes against that. Like, honestly, if you and I were to come together and plot this plan, we got to steal Jesus' body. Yeah. We need the world to believe Jesus rose again.
Yeah.
I don't believe we would carry out our Savior's body naked or undress him. I think also you're moved by, oh no, like they could find us, they could discover us, we got to be in and out super fast. So the idea of like leaving this behind, that's not really an option.
Yeah.
The shroud is an argument for the resurrection to me. Don't get me wrong. Like the shroud, the act, like what Jesus was laid in, is a phenomenal argument worth considering.
Yeah.
Like why was it folded and left there?
Right.
If you stole it, or if his enemy stole it.
Right.
Like regardless of how you want to look at this, because either Jesus rose, or the argument is the disciples stole the body, or his enemies stole the body. There's really not another option. He was laid to rest. He was laid there. He either rose again from the grave, conquered death, or the disciples stole him, or his enemies stole him. His enemies stealing and leaving that doesn't make sense. The disciples stealing that and leaving that doesn't make sense. Him leaving that, I think, does make sense. I think him not being in a hurry to get out, not being in a rush, but the idea that the stone did not keep Jesus in. Obviously, Jesus didn't need to roll back the stone to get out. The stone, I think, was removed so we could go in and see the tomb's empty.
Amen.
I think the stone being rolled away is not so Jesus could get out, so we could get in.
Yeah.
But I think us seeing that and then contemplating, and actually, John's gospel shows them noticing the shroud, and it says like they saw it, and that word "saw" means to contemplate and think on, like they're actually looking at this, going, "Why is this here?" Maybe he's risen. Like that's what was like going through their minds. So the shroud is an argument for the resurrection of Jesus, but is the Shroud of Turin like?
Yeah.
But because if honestly scientists came out, and this is what I think we're getting at, if a group of scientists study this thing thoroughly and go, this is cloth from the 12th century, this is cloth from the medieval ages. Like there is nothing about this whatsoever that shows this is first century cloth that was used specifically in Jerusalem. If we had people come out and like show us that this is not the cloth, that does not harm my faith. I would not be discouraged.
Yeah.
I would not be like, oh no, the Shroud of Turin isn't real. Like that would not move me at all.
Yes.
So my concern is for Christians who it's interesting. It's like intriguing, this idea. But my concern is for Christians who maybe put their faith in the resurrection of Jesus because of the Shroud of Turin. And if they say, guys, look we have the Shroud of Turin, Jesus is risen. And then we find out beyond a shadow of a doubt, empirical evidence shows that this is not a shroud from first century Jerusalem. By no means, like literally, I would not be offended. I would not be upset. I would not be like, oh no, the Shroud of Turin's not real. I would say the shroud itself, though, in the gospel literature, is a great argument. And again, my concern is just there's so many other things we could say, hey, Christians, look to this for evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. I just don't have that on my list.
Yeah, I think part of what makes it attractive to people is that we are in such a hyper scientific era. Scientists and doctors are the priest class of the modern West.
That's a good point.
And so I think I think Christians are looking, for better or for worse, but are looking for something that can be presented in that way. Like, look at we tested the blood. We investigated it in this way. There's all these sort of tests and studies that are coming out relating to it. And I think it's sort of in a way just, it's historical in nature, obviously, but it's a lot more scientific than the Bible.
You're saying because I can taste it, or not taste it, but if I can feel it, I can look at it, I see with the eye,
Well, I imagine a Christian going down the shroud rabbit hole and seeing like all of this type of evidence that's scientific in nature and going, oh, that's really cool. Oh, no way, they tested that. Oh, that checks out. That checks out. That checks out. Really cool. And then going, man, I could like talk to my friends about this who are materialists, who don't believe in like the historical method even as a trustworthy conduit for truth.
Yeah.
So the Bible is out like to begin with. And so, but if I can like give them something scientific, it might crack a little light into their materialist box. And so I think there's at least a potentially good motive, or like I guess what I'm saying is, regardless of the motive, I think that's part of the reason why it's so hot right now as a topic is we're in the age of science.
Yeah, makes sense.
And the other thing I wanted to say is to kind of agree with you is I don't remember the reference. Maybe you can help me, but we had everything that we needed for life and godliness before the shroud, right? So everything. We had everything we needed for life and godliness before the shroud. So that means we don't need the shroud.
No. I mean, I want to like say you're right. There is an allure to it. Like, it's interesting. It's like, man, if this is real, if that is Jesus's image imprinted onto it. And I think we probably should clarify there is a difference between, like, you can still see the image of Jesus with the naked eye. You don't just need the photo negative. You still can see it lightly. But there's something, like you said, appealing. Like, look, you can actually see. And I guess, okay, I have a couple thoughts. Sometimes when people say the word faith, they just think that means like just blind, dumb, throw reason and logic away.
Yeah.
Like, I'll say this: we do walk by faith, not by sight. But what is faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I do believe we have evidence for our faith. I absolutely do believe that. And I would say we should look and examine the evidence for our faith. And yes, maybe you don't believe in the Bible as a historical, credible document. I would say reason does matter. I would say we have to, like, most historians who are not Christians would say Jesus was a real person who died on a cross. The question then is, okay, well, where's his body? Is it lost? Is it stolen? Is it buried? What happened to that? And I think, like, the reason still puts you on this beautiful search of, okay, Jesus was real. He died on a cross, or he died a death that we'd say is substitutionary, but he died on a cross. And then now where is his body? Where is his body? And you still have to do something with that. And I would say reason can still get you to believe, like, well, I like how Blaise Pascal said, I believe the witnesses who get their throats cut. There is something about just like, hey, just think about it logically. The witnesses who are not willing to do harm but receive harm because I will die for this truth, and I'm a firsthand seer of the resurrection of Jesus. Not, if you don't believe, I'll murder you, like some faiths might do. If you don't believe my faith, I'll murder you. That's not Christianity. Christianity is, I'll die for you. I'll die for the resurrection of Jesus. I know he's alive. I know he's risen. And I think that Blaise Pascal kind of French philosopher take of, like, you know what, the witnesses who get their throats cut, I'm more likely to believe. I guess my point being, there's so many other things we could, like, focus on when it comes to evidence of the resurrection of Jesus, which we probably won't fully get into right now by any means. But the Shroud of Turin is not a necessary evidence for me to build my faith on the resurrection of Jesus. And I do get concerned if and when it's proven that this is not a first century Jewish cloth or whatever it might be. And they can prove it. Like, they can prove it empirically. So I'm not saying they can, but I'm saying if that were to happen, I think some people's faith could be, like, torn down overnight because it was not rooted in a biblical faith that even Paul offers. Like, consider these things for the resurrection of Jesus, or the four gospels, consider these things for the resurrection of Jesus. I would just say that we as Christians should be, like, lifting up other arguments for the resurrection of Jesus, I think, more than the Shroud of Turin. That'd be my take.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I'm also thinking of the old song, He lives, Christ Jesus lives today. He walks with me and talks with me along life's merry way. You ask me how I know he lives within my heart. And that's an argument from experience, but I think it's really important. Like that, I agree with that song. Like, you ask me how I know he lives. First of all, the historic case, like everything that we have spent other videos dealing with, but also I do have a little bit of a concern where if your main thing for the shroud, if your main reason for the resurrection is the scientific evidence that is currently still standing for the Shroud of Turin, it makes me wonder, is that just in the context of conversation? Is that just in the context of evangelism? In which case, for the reasons you already said, I'm basically with you there. I still don't think it's the best. But or even at a personal level, is that an anchor point for you as an individual? And then I think that's a different question where it's like, Christ is risen and really knowable. Like, we can actually taste and see that the Lord is good. He is risen and therefore alive. We actually can fellowship with God. We can pray with God in a two-way, street and through His Word and everything else. And to me, again, not in an apologetics or evangelism way, because someone could just say, "Well, why would I trust you? You're crazy," and that's fair. So it's not an argument, but I'm talking about as a human being, direct knowledge of God through His Spirit, and which works alongside of His Word is, and I know a true believer will know what I'm talking about here. It becomes as absurd as someone trying to convince you that your mom doesn't exist or your wife doesn't exist. You're like he not only exists, but he is the most important thing about my life.
Yes. It's funny how a skeptic might not understand that, because it really isn't a phenomenal apologetic
It's
point
bad.
to make.
Yeah.
But dude, it's funny. I think about, like, I can play basketball at a gym somewhere randomly, and I could talk to these guys about my wife, and eventually one guy could be like, bro, you always talk about your wife, but I've never seen her. Show me a picture. I'm like, I don't have my phone on me. I don't believe you're married. It's like, nothing they could say. I wouldn't be like, well, am I married? I'm not gonna start.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna start to second guess. Was I ever really married? It's true. I've seen these guys 100 times now, and never with my wife. They've never seen her. Maybe I'm not. Like, I'm not gonna
That's
ever.
really how it is.
Yes, I'm never gonna. So you're right in that sense for us personally.
Yeah.
But obviously, like, when we're trying to, like, broadcast, hey, here's a reason for the resurrection, the Shroud of Turin, and this, like, I just would hope that Christians would know there are a lot of other arguments we can and should be making for the resurrection of Jesus rather than that.
Yeah.
Use the shroud, even use the actual fact that they found that. Why was that there? Like,
Yeah.
talk through it in different ways, but
Yeah.
that wouldn't be my, let me broadcast to the world that this is truth. I would say there's a lot of other arguments we could make to say, here's some good reasons and good evidences that Jesus is alive. He's not buried somewhere. He's ruling and reigning. Like, I would say, let's talk through those reasons we have versus this thing that could be discredited in our lifetime. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Or maybe we keep people in suspense. I just don't like the idea of building your faith off that.
Yeah. I basically agree with you. I would be curious what people in the comments think. You know, like I said before we started recording, it is something that I think can be controversial within the body of Christ, can kind of be like a division point.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it's worth talking about in the sense that it's better to do a little bit of damage control in case it does get discredited. Better now, at least as let's have it weighted properly in comparison with everything else now, rather than having to do that work on the back end or having to, like, deconstruct out of Christianity because the shroud was proven false or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, if you want more arguments for the resurrection of Jesus, I think Lee Strobel's book, The Case for the Resurrection, is a good start. Yeah. There's a lot of other, obviously, authors who wrote about the resurrection, but I would say start there. That would be my hope. You will hear good reasoning, I think good evidences, and I would just hope that people would consider those things first.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.